Hello, dear friends. Today in the Allat TV studio, we have the esteemed Tigor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
And Janna.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, along with the question, does God exist, which we raised in one of our previous videos, the following question comes to a person: how to actually interact with God, how to communicate with Him, and how to come into contact with this true God's love, so that the knowledge, let's say, about God wouldn't be some abstract and very distant theory without practice. And when people manage to feel this God's love at least a little bit, they embark on this path, the spiritual path. And this path certainly changes human life drastically. And it is full of tremendous, incredible inner discoveries, surges, and rises. However, aside from this, downfalls surely happen to people on this path as well. But it is still visible how people get up and continue going to God in spite of anything. And during all this, they wonder how to make it so that there are as few of these stumbling blocks on this path as possible, and so that the path to God is confident, so that a person would go to God already with firm steps. And it's interesting that both in the modern times to this day and in ancient times in the previous centuries, people who were following the spiritual path encountered similar experience. And let's say they had the same problems because they...
Nothing changes both in the past and nowadays. I will answer your question right away. How should a person follow the spiritual path in order not to stumble and not to get deluded? Guys, follow the wide, clean, and firm road. Don't turn off this road, and everything will be fine. That's the simplest way.
And it's also interesting how many paths are described.
No, a lot of tracks are described, while the path is one. Yet when people go astray from this wide straight path, they begin to lay all sorts of footpaths, all sorts of trails, through mountains, through woods, through various caves. Well, this is also, so to say, possible. But at the same time, it makes the way longer, and sometimes life isn't enough to reach the destination.
Right.
Unfortunately, this is so.
Consciousness says that it is very hard, that how can I'm such an ordinary person. What can I do on this path? After all, I am not a saint to follow the sacred path. That is, I sin.
Yet what is the sacred path? The sacred path, what is it?
They understand that it's a path of great purity, but people say that I'm already so sinful, I've had so much in my life.
This isn't true. The sacred path is, first and foremost, insights. When a person understands that he's not a monkey and that he has originated, pardon me, not from random combinations, and that there is something greater in him, that which distinguishes him from an animal, from that very ordinary pig, let's say. Not just some anthropometric features, and not only intellect, but first of all that which is inside, which makes a person a human. When a person realizes that there is something divine in him, that very spark which should not be blown out, but on the contrary is necessary to make it burning hot, it's necessary to intensify that light which is inherent in him. When a person is aware of this, that's exactly the sacred path, meaning from the light. When having felt the light inside, a person goes from this light to the greater light, while everything else is already what people exalt. And what is the path of a saint? In our society, everything is actually twisted. How do we perceive the saint's path, my friends? In torment and suffering, as it has been imposed on us by mindsets from consciousness. A person must go through some caves, hermitry, some mazes, impassable forests or mountains. You say, how can a person get through this? Have you ever been on footpaths in the mountains? Well, those who have been, especially on difficult crossings, they know what I mean. It's much better to walk on a flat, solid, and clean road.
Well-trodden one, too.
Throughout millions of years, let's put it so. Or to walk through the mountains. Or a simple question, going through an impassable forest, where everything is overgrown. There are centuries-old forests. Nothing has ever been cleaned. These are not modern forests around the city where they are cleaned, to which people go to pick mushrooms or to admire nature, but real forests. There is a difference. So who makes you, my friends? Literally wander through impassable places. That's where the word astray comes from, by the way. I mean, a person goes astray and gets lost, so there is delusion. No one hinders him.
It lures them to the side.
But nevertheless, if a person feels this divine essence in himself, and he seeks to become a human, to get away from the animal component, even if he walks through the maze, but he moves towards the light. Yes, to the dictation of those very demons, as they say, or that very consciousness, as it is correct to say. He goes astray. He's looking for God in the mountains, he's looking for Him in the forests, at the bottom of the ocean or somewhere else, or on other planets, it doesn't matter, but he's looking for Him. This is already the striving from light to light. This is already the path of a saint.
Right. We got the following letter from a participant. I decided, a girl writes, to try to live for the sake of the Holy Spirit, to live at least a day.
No need to live for the sake of the Holy Spirit. He doesn't need anything from you except that you stand by His side. You should live for your own sake, and that's what is right. In attaining and not drive the Holy Spirit away by your deeds and actions. This is the right thing to do.
Yes, and she shared the experience that even after making such a decision, just during one day, such a goal for herself, is it hard for me to live even one day without doing any bad deeds, without thinking about bad things, without thinking at all about what causes pain, despair, or resentment, but just to plunge into the feeling of love and to live that day by real life, life for the sake of personality, for the sake of the spiritual world. And by evening, as the girl writes, coming from work, she realized that it was possible, and it was such an inner discovery and revelation that for a very long time consciousness had been driving her away from the path, from the fact that a person is actually capable of this. But having understood this kind of discovery, having made a small step towards it, the person understood that this is possible, and moreover, it is possible to live in this, and one can live in this happily and joyfully.
Not can, one should live in this.
Yes.
It's very simple. Get rid of the evil inside yourself. Just stop being a beast. Become a human. And everything opens up to you. Is it too complicated?
While consciousness.
Well, it's inconvenient for consciousness, so it starts to do what? To complicate things. And consciousness twists the simple knowledge about the clean, smooth, and broad path into these difficulties that you cannot do this. It is only for saints.
Yes, it throws in this sinfulness that you're sinful, you...
But here's a simple question. If there is a human, then there is a soul in him, and the soul is nothing but a light in the darkness. So it's already light, meaning you have to strive from light to light, and this is what the path of a saint is. There is nothing else. And again, many also hope that if a person sticks to morality in the external,
Yes.
he won't do bad things in the external, forgetting about the inside, about those actors who incite him to make a choice. Because in reality, a person doesn't think about what is bad, right? It is imposed on him. Evil is imposed on him, negativity, condemnation, greed, envy, imitation, the whole bouquet is imposed on him. Let's not enumerate it, everyone knows by themselves what is imposed on them. And only a person chooses whether to act in this direction as actors in his head prompt him or not to act. Isn't that so?
Yes.
What demons say is their problem, that's why they are demons. What a person accepts or doesn't accept is important. If he begins to discuss or judge someone with them, then he's already one of them. Is this sinful or not? From the perspective of religion, I mean. Of course it's sinful. Whereas if we look at this from, let's say, not a religious perspective, but indeed from the perspective of the path, from the perspective of the psyche or physics, from whatever you like, then when a person gets drawn into the process and pays his attention to negativity, that's what he becomes. In the literal sense of the word, after all, personality, we have already mentioned this many times, doesn't perceive the three-dimensional world, but it is listening. And that's why the actors have an opportunity to dictate to us as personality whatever they like. And most people, unfortunately, don't even understand who they are. Their consciousness, but which consciousness, primary or secondary one? A human perceives himself as a body, but he doesn't perceive himself as personality. But again, who perceives the body? Primary consciousness does. Who feels pain? Primary consciousness does, right? Who do all sorts of pictures in the head come to? Well, to us. But who is us? So when we say, who do they come to? They come to me, and who are you? Me. What do you mean by this me? And this failure to distinguish and misunderstanding deludes a person in the most literal sense of the word. That is, a person begins to walk through forests, through all sorts of mazes, and what does he fall into? Into a delusion. However, when he rejects this negativity, no matter how consciousness imposes it on him, but he makes that very consciousness, for example, say a prayer or go to the temple, then everything falls into place. He sends it to the temple once, twice, regardless of whether it wants this or not, but he gets up and goes there anyway, and everything falls into place. If a person feels inside, really feels this thirst for freedom, the thirst for love, the thirst for light, for increasing this light, then everything is simple.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, you've mentioned the control over consciousness, and people sent questions regarding primary consciousness. Once you said that primary consciousness must control which thoughts to accept from secondary consciousness. And people tried to do this in different ways. They threatened and told their primary consciousness that if you give me only bad thoughts or accept something bad, I will punish you.
I will not be friends with you. Exactly, yes,
I'll
sure.
put you under a cold shower, whatever.
I won't feed you.
And they say it doesn't work. And they sincerely ask if you could possibly
I will
share
explain this to our friends on a simple
some
example.
examples.
Imagine that you are an animal trainer and you need to prepare a bear, a wild animal, for a performance within a certain period of time. Will you tell it? Would you tell your consciousness? A question, who is speaking in you and to whom? Have you ever thought of this? Or will you act? You will show and explain somehow that the bear should ride a bicycle. I mean, you'll put it on a bicycle. When it climbs on it, you give it what? Something tasty, and this reflex gets developed in it. So is our consciousness, guys. While you are listening to it, getting involved in a conversation, telling things and frightening it, you are as if engaged in the spiritual, while in fact you remain a viewer. And there are actors on the stage, one of whom plays your part and the other one plays the part of that bear. And these actors live instead of you. You will never come to reconciliation with them, and primary consciousness will never take your side. Why? A simple question. Because at this time, the actor that plays the part of primary consciousness is talking to the same actor from secondary consciousness, or vice versa. You won't notice the difference. While in fact, if you talk and explain to the bear, it will never do what you want from it. Everything is very simple.
By persuading it, yes.
Sure. Moreover, to scare, who scares whom? You have acted so tough. Well, he can punish it and put the body under the shower. What will primary consciousness tell you right away? That it's cold. It means that an energy surge is needed, otherwise you will fall ill, and it will begin to say so much. And if you fall ill, you won't get to class or you won't go to work. You'll have a lot of problems, so all this, one by one, again will be poured on you, meaning as information, and necessity to pay for all this. And this personality, without observing, without seeing this world, without understanding elementary things, how that very primary consciousness works, as you haven't been developing, you will finance all this. But if you treat it like a little bear, that very primary consciousness, it tells you things you don't need, but you do feel and understand that this is wrong, so you simply ignore it. And that's all. You ignore it once, twice, the third time it wants to eat. It will climb on the bike and ride it. Moreover, even if you cannot walk the tightrope and juggle at the same time, consciousness will learn to. It won't go anywhere, because it wants to eat. They have nothing but hunger.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, the development of personality has just been mentioned. Many also don't understand what should personality do to develop. After all, the development of personality takes place
In
only
freedom.
there, at home, while being at home.
And solely in contact with the spiritual world, meaning when personality pays attention exactly to attracting this light, when it is attaining and increasing love, when a person lives in happiness and in joy, because God doesn't have anything bad. When a person strives for convergence with the spiritual world, he precisely gains what is genuine, this life. And then, again, many think that he should be good on this path, and later, after death, all his sins will be forgiven because he was good. Whereas what do heavenly angels say? Only in this body in which you have sinned, you can save yourself. Isn't that so? Without a body, a person will no longer be able to do anything. Without a body, he is one of the two. He is either an angel or, pardon me, a subpersonality, meaning he is either in heaven or in hell, speaking the language of Christianity, for instance.
Regarding salvation, Igor Mikhailovich, when starting to look for the experience of those people who have already saved themselves, people face such a phenomenon as mystical experience. And consciousness of many, even encountering a phrase that it is something mystical, mysticism, identifies it in such a way that it is kind of a myth, that it is something illogical, superstitious, or that it is even something associated with magic.
And when people encounter this, consciousness tells one part of people that this is absurd, fairy tales, because this is illogical. All this isn't true. It just cannot be so. As we climbed down a palm, gained consciousness, developed it, and we are simply a product of evolution. And there is no God at all, and there cannot be such kind of logic. And it tells the second ones that this is extremely difficult, that, pardon me, it is so hard to become a saint. Look, you are an ordinary person after all.
Yes.
Will you be able to feed on grasshoppers for 40 years or anything else? After all, you have life. And what if people already have a family? And what if a person is grown up and he's got a job? So many questions arise. Well, to the third ones it says vice versa, that these are magic actions. You must gain these actions first in order to embark on the spiritual path. And then, using this magic power, you will be able to cognize the unknown. There is no other way. And what do we find? In the religions of the world, we find confirmations of the first, the second, and the third. Isn't it so? Excuse me, but very simply walk out and go. You should just stop sitting in this theater of actors' performance on the stage, where instead of actors, your consciousness forces you to take, let's say, the position of either one or another actor. After all, doesn't it happen this way? Instead of listening to fairy tales and burning your life, listening to the tales and ravings of these actors, you can simply stand up. You just stand up right now and walk out, in a literal sense of the word, and even slam the door onto a wide road and without turning anywhere go home. Is this difficult?
Actually, it's not.
But what do you need to do?
Not to listen to consciousness.
There must be action.
Right.
And here is the stumbling block, because there must be action. But as long as a person listens to actors philosophizing among themselves what spiritual path to choose for him, and the person doesn't know at all that consciousness isn't his, and their function is precisely not to let you go, Because it is exactly that very demon which is mentioned in your religions, my friends. That's what consciousness is. And the function of consciousness is to make you become a subpersonality. Or in the language of religion, go to hell, right? Why? Because then these demons gain a long life. For them it is centuries and even millennia of life.
Igor Mikhailovich, why is faith without action dead? There is such an expression.
Because there must be action.
But what kind of action?
And there must be deeds, firstly. It's not even faith, but striving. For that very faith should be at least supported by what? You should stop listening to the actors, stand up and go, begin to act.
By inner experience.
Secondly, when a person gains this experience, the experience of communicating with the spiritual world, when he feels this love, then again he gains a desire and aspiration for what? For sharing this love with others. If he doesn't share and leaves it all in himself, accumulates and strengthens it, it is guaranteed that a person will fall into magic and he will precisely depart for another world. Excuse me, the material world, not the spiritual world. Because this aspiration is imposed and takes place under consciousness's control, meaning when a demon controls a person on the spiritual path, what do you think, my friends? Where will this person come? If someone called a demon, an imp, no matter what they call it, decides for him. Isn't that so? A simple question.
Thanks to these answers, we understand. And once you also said that it is very important to know God. And what you've said that both internal actions and actions in the external world are important. That
Certainly.
faith becomes knowledge only when, as you say, the action is well tried by this experience.
When a person gains experience, of course. If a person just believes, I'll just repeat, and I mentioned it many times, he will always stumble. Today I believe, tomorrow I don't believe, today I believe in someone, tomorrow I believe in someone else, today I believe in one religion, tomorrow I believe in another one. I believe in anything and in anyone, but not in myself. Yet what is important? To know who you are and believe in yourself. Faith in yourself is needed. While the spiritual world should be explored. And the path, precisely the spiritual path, is the path of knowledge, is the path of experience. There is no other.
Right. Now you've touched upon a topic that there is an understanding that people even listen. They say that yes, it's all simple, I can. But immediately, on the other hand, thoughts from consciousness come to them. But I have work, I have children, I have a bunch of various problems that I cannot part with. That is confusing. What?
It's interesting that exactly at the time when a person feels a need for communication with the spiritual world and feels that this world is not his, but immediately he also listens to consciousness which tells him, what about you? After all, you have a job, a family, children, you have responsibility, but who takes away your responsibility? A simple question. And how will your children or family hinder you, my friend? They won't. On the contrary, it's a plus for the family. Why? A person becomes responsible.
He changes internally.
Because he understands that it's not just his family, it is his scope of responsibility, right? Meaning the person won't commit what? He won't commit what is called sins in religions, towards his family, children, parents, and so on. Meaning he gains responsibility and he understands that it is necessary. He's no longer playing. He will not participate in any silly quarrels, judgments, or anything else because he understands that this is from demons. He won't take alcohol, drugs, or anything else because this is unacceptable on the spiritual path. Is it bad or good for the family?
A person's life changes. He begins to live.
When a responsible person appears in a family who is balanced, calm, but also joyful, and not just a sad one. Why joyful? Because communication with God doesn't bring anything except joy, right? It is really love. And again, it should also be understood that many play at spirituality. A person comes home and begins to rub everyone's noses into the religion he has believed in. And again, at home, he wants to seem whom? either an imam or a pastor.
Yes.
While in actual fact, who is he? A tyrant. He begins to hammer into them something which he himself hasn't understood and demand from them to be what he himself would like to be but fails to. Isn't that so? Is this spirituality? A simple question. True spirituality, my friends, is understanding that no matter how close a person is to you, he is just a human, and he has the right to choose whom to serve, God or the devil. If this person is dear to you or is in the zone of your responsibility, then you cannot impose on him what he doesn't want. A simple point. And if you want to help him, show him by your example. If a person doesn't choose this, it's his business, it's his life, and no matter how dear he is to you, whether it is your child or, as they say, your other half, well, on the other hand, a person wants to live like this. It's his right, given to him by God. Are you entitled to impose this on him? No, you're not.
Igor Mikhailovich, you have said about being an example oneself.
Of course.
I've recalled the experience of the first Christians, about whom even pagans used to say, look how they love one another, so strong was.
Because they were honest, and they lived as Jesus bequeathed to them. They didn't live by the canons which people made up later and made look important. They didn't live by the theatricality and sham. They didn't do this. They really just lived. They really just loved God. And they followed the straight path along the wide road, and all the rest envied them. And there is a simple question: why envy? Why didn't they walk together with them? And who hindered them? Nobody but an imp in the head.
Yes.
Right.
Is it really hard to get away from the power of a demon? It won't force you to do anything. In fact, it's you who does everything. The demon only offers. It is a thought in your head. While you do all the rest, even if you let that thought come in, you cause chemical reactions in your body, with emotions and everything else. Well, excuse me, you are the one who paid first. You buy stupidity from the demon with your attention and your life. You pay with your life for that bad thing it offered you, and you implement it in this world. It's not the demon, it doesn't do this. It's just like an advertisement. Now you'll get an advertisement to buy boots of size 45, and also fishnet ones to wear in winter, with a holy soul, for a huge amount of money. Will you buy them?
No.
Why? They are so beautiful with holes. It's exactly to walk on snow in winter, so cool and nice.
I have boots already.
Like these?
No.
Well, here, look, they may be shiny. Well, it's like this, we look and take care of the body. But sometimes, thanks to advertising, of course, we buy a lot of what we don't need. Again, of what is imposed or uncomfortable.
Right.
It's like in the cartoon, if you remember, about the cat Matroskin, when the dog Shari bought sneakers in winter. He says, but they are beautiful.
Yes, exactly.
So it turns out that a person is trying to shift the responsibility. He wants to stay good inside, but it's the devil who tempted him that is bad.
Well, the devil is neither good nor bad. He is just hungry, and he cannot know the spiritual world, but he knows that the spiritual world exists. All he knows is that when a person gets out of his control, it means that the devil will be on a diet, will receive much less food, and will work much more. And eventually, his age of existence will be limited to the existence of the physical body, that's it. That's all the devil will know then. He understands this beforehand. So naturally, he does everything to make it different.
There is also a delusion, people wrote about it, regarding working at half strength. That is, there is a certain reserve of energy that is given to a person for his entire life. And if he does his best in a spiritual practice, does his best at work or in any business, he will simply be exhausted and will not have enough strength for anything else.
Again, it's a very convenient mindset. or an attempt to justify one's own laziness and idleness. Who is this person actually? He is a slave. He's enslaved by those actors or demons who tell him that you won't do it. You won't make it because you will use up all your gasoline. You'd better lie down, rest. And as for the spiritual, you still have time, right? Or don't do your best at work. Why? This is actually laziness.
And in spiritual practices, people also...
And selfishness. Well, of course. Especially in spiritual practices. What are you doing? It's scary there. You cannot go there.
The topic of fear is a particularly acute issue because people are afraid of losing themselves due to fear. Meaning that I will start performing spiritual practices and something will happen to me. Some kind of transformation that I won't be able to control. The question is formulated.
Of course. Why does this happen? Because in fact, if a person begins to perform proper spiritual practices, consciousness precisely experiences that which it will ultimately lose. And this information passes to personality already as I. That is, it turns out that when a person gets fear from the system, from consciousness, he perceives it as his own. In this case, this is a lack of experience and understanding by people. Or they take the side of this actor in their heads and believe that it is them. Well, that also happens.
Since we've mentioned the topic of fear, we received an interesting letter. In the book Sensei 4 by Anastasia Novych, an example is described when a person, having come up to the edge, let's say to a certain limit, felt a very strong fear, such a tremendous horror that he couldn't overcome. So people write that when they plunge into a spiritual practice, somewhere inside someone in them secretly hopes and expects when this feeling of enormous fear will finally come, meaning they don't live in here and now but expect this fear.
The sign that they are moving, that they are already close to the edge.
And if at the time of the initial plunge they experience this feeling of fear at least a little bit, they think that there is just a little bit left. It's so simple to take a step and I'm already there. So
well, what is actually happening?
I'll wait until tomorrow.
Of course, and tomorrow it will be like a horizon to infinity. Yet what is actually going on? In fact, these are people who are trying to do a spiritual practice under Satan's control. The prayer performed by Satan will not be heard by God, and you should be aware of that, my friends. Simply. Isn't that so? Why approach spiritual practices with fear, with an expectation of anything or something else? And again, a person has merely experienced fear and he already thinks that he is passing the guards, right?
Yes, the last one.
He's at the last guard and the gate of heaven will open for him now.
But he's sort of not ready now, but maybe tomorrow.
Well, may God grant, of course, that tomorrow it opens to him. But what about working? Removing the illusion, removing selfishness, pridefulness, and looking soberly at everything, at oneself. At those thoughts that come, who is telling you this, my friend? And why? Just really honestly approach yourself. And the first rule is what?
Honesty on the spiritual path.
Honesty on the spiritual path, first of all towards oneself. And then everything falls into place.
Another question that worries people is that when a person performs a spiritual practice, he can describe his experience, and when he finishes the practice, he remembers what he has felt and seen. Do I perform the practice correctly if I'm able to describe my feelings during the practice?
Performance of a certain spiritual practice, if we speak about a real spiritual practice, not a meditation.
The spiritual practice.
During any meditation or any autogenic training, a person remembers everything because they are performed with consciousness and by means of consciousness, right? Whereas the spiritual practice, its meaning, lies precisely in detachment from consciousness. But if detachment of personality from consciousness takes place, in other words, personality plunges so deeply that consciousness cannot enter, then at this point, upon this detachment, a state similar to sleep occurs. The person cannot remember anything. Why? Because consciousness cannot perceive anything. Therefore, at the initial stages, a person should first and foremost, let's say, control primary consciousness to such an extent that it must take the personality's side and not the side of secondary consciousness. As we know, primary consciousness, it is like that. It always swings and it is always where it's beneficial. In relation to secondary consciousness, you will never succeed in taming secondary consciousness. You can force it, but you will never make it stand on your side. The devil will never serve God, just to make it clear. But while gaining the initial experience, during performance of the initial practices, with partial, I emphasize it, involvement of primary consciousness, then this is a correct way. Then yes, the initial spiritual practices can even be felt on a physical level. A person experiences all this light, all this joy, even up to the hormonal level. Why? Because primary consciousness is partially involved. But when a person already freely performs really deep practices at the level of personality, when he is already developed, it is one of the stages, I'll go back to that point, precisely performing it with a partial involvement of primary consciousness. It is necessary so that, on the one hand, the person remains, let's say, under control while performing actions, but at the same time remains on the spiritual path, restraining primary consciousness and understanding what is happening. Because having no experience as personality, how to control, live as personality, live freely from consciousness, upon detachment, the person will simply fall asleep, he will not know what is happening. Whereas gradually developing, personality already gains freedom, and going into spiritual practice, he no longer needs crutches, he can plunge deep enough or fly up high, and then it's not a problem for him. He remembers everything and knows everything, but there are no physical sensations. Even the joy that comes from the spiritual world when a person is in contact, it affects the physical body. After all, it affects everything. Why? Because we are in a normal awake state, but we spend up to 90 or even more % on the contact of personality with the spiritual world, and this constant connection, which is strengthening, cannot but affect the work of primary consciousness. And naturally, this suppresses the impact of secondary consciousness, but doesn't weaken intellectual capabilities and the ability to develop secondary consciousness in an intellectual sense. This is normal, but it's when a person already has this ability. While at the first stages, of course, primary consciousness, still you need to make it tamed and slightly lean on it. Then, this already gives such an effect of constant rise and control. It's easier this way, it's easier for personality to develop and easier to perform a spiritual practice without falling asleep. Why? Because, I'll come back a little, when personality is already more developed and is able to perform it, well, thank God, many of our friends are able to do this and already know how to do it. Then even when plunging deeply, the physical body doesn't experience anything, but upon returning, the person remembers and knows everything, meaning it's not a problem for him without involving consciousness at all. Why? Because he, as personality, already becomes more developed and gains the ability of self-control, let's say. Well, in this case, self-control is the control of consciousness, and at the same time, he possesses memory and skills that are constantly developing. The person already gains life, while he is still here, and life can only be gained here. When the physical body has ended, when everything is gone, then excuse me, the train is gone.
People also ask about signs. In a spiritual practice, when a person plunges and he's in these deep feelings, can there be any signs from the spiritual world during a spiritual practice?
Well, there are signs on the road. Turn right, no entry, or something else. And here, in this case, it's a question precisely from secondary consciousness. Why from secondary? Because it's very easy to delude people if you tell them about such signs. Secondary consciousness draws a hallucination, it draws anything, and simply continues to control the person who is performing a spiritual practice, palming off these signs on him and saying, "Look, that's it, you're already no less than bodhisattva." Isn't that so?
It is.
Are there signs? Guys, whether there are signs or not, there is a road, there is a path, there is aspiration and understanding. Nothing hinders you, except for consciousness. You should step over your lazy consciousness. It's not lazy, it's very aggressive towards a person gaining freedom. Still, we must learn not to feed the beast, but to spend these funds on spiritual salvation of ourselves. Then it is right. And not to turn off the road, and everything will be fine. It's very simple. But all this is complicated by consciousness. The first stages are always difficult. The initial experience is always acquired in a struggle, battle, and confrontation when a person is studying consciousness. It doesn't like to be studied, but it always seeks to learn something from the spiritual world. So consciousness is forced to let people off. Well, again, what does it mean to let off? If a person chooses life, the devil cannot forbid him. In the same way, when a person chooses death, God cannot forbid him.
Right. There is also a question from the movement participants that there are two groups of people, those who are involved in projects and those who are actively focused on spiritual practices. The question is that those people who actively help in the projects, consciousness tells them that spiritual practices are not needed because they do a lot anyway. They give their all and do their best to help people. While spiritual practices, the spiritual state is preserved in everyday life anyway. And there is the second group of people who say that I do spiritual practices, I actually feel so good, there is joy and love inside. I feel a connection with God. Why would I do the projects that would distract me from this state? So there are two extremes of this kind.
These are stones lying on two sides of the road. This one is a stone lying on the roadside, and that one is a stone lying on the roadside too, but they are near the road. They see the road, they see people walking along this road, and they are content with this. And they say, why would I? I'm near anyway, right? Well, in fact, are these people going anywhere? They are, but in the wrong direction.
Regarding what you've said that I'm near anyway, after all, in various religions too, a person's affiliation to some religion or to some movement or to some group was often perceived as I'm near, they will help me to get saved, they will save me. That is...
Not even like that. It's not that they will help me to get saved, meaning in this case, such a deception occurs when a person gets into a field. While here, pardon me, physics works. I'll give a simple example. You enter a hut after being in freezing cold. It's warm inside, but there is a stove that produces this warmth. And so a person, while being within this emission of warmth, he eventually forgets that it is simply cold outside. Let's suppose it's minus 20 degrees Celsius. Well, he needs to walk 5 to 10 kilometers across a field, and the person, while staying near this stove, forgets to get dressed, runs out into the field undressed and in slippers. Like he's a hero, right? He runs out, it's cold, he comes back inside. Whereas what is necessary? A simple question is necessary, my friends, to get dressed in warm clothes, come out and walk and become a little stove yourself. Basking is very nice, it's wonderful to be near a stove, but you should become a stove yourself. That's what is right. Whereas when people are, like you say, near those who are a stove for them, and they bask, they feel good, they feel wonderful. Clever ones. I emphasize again, use this warmth in order to kindle their own stove. They use this light in order to light up inside. While those whom consciousness controls, unfortunately, are a little bit mistaken, just like those stones lying on the side of our wide, flat, solid road. Why? because they are near. And everything is fine, and this is enough for them. The first ones think, why would I engage in spiritual practices and self-development? I'm doing a lot anyway. While the other ones believe that since they engage in the spiritual, why would they help others? But in fact, pardon me, everything should be combined. A person who stands on the spiritual path should walk instead of standing. To step on the path is one thing. One can even lie down like our little stones, and consciousness will tell them a lot. Well, it's actually more correct, after stepping on the spiritual path, to stop standing and start walking, and it's necessary to walk all the time, and the faster the better. That's when there comes an understanding that it's necessary not just to strive from the position of an egoist, but here I take the highest degree of egoism, or holy egoism as it is called. It's to achieve self-salvation, but it's also necessary to help others. And to help others means, again, to convey an understanding to people directly, indirectly, or in some other way that there is a path, and it is simple, and it's in all religions. It is everywhere, and the most important point, that the devil exists. People will perceive this faster than a notion that God exists, no matter how paradoxical this is, but it's true. It's easy to find the devil, no matter how he is hiding. He simply disguises himself as ourselves. But it's very easy to seize this lizard by its tail. It can surely throw it off. But, in any case, even having a lizard's tail in your hands, you will understand, my friend, that this tail is exactly the tail of the devil that exists. And there is banal logic here, since the devil exists, hence God exists, while inside every person, no matter what kind of an atheist or whoever else he is, he does feel that there is the spiritual world and that it is near. Every person feels when he stops lying to himself. He feels that the spiritual world is very close and that he is separated from infinite love and joy merely as if by a pellicle of a soap bubble, and a person feels and understands that this is wrong and unfair, that human life is so short and so fleeting, and that in fact, this is given to a human for gaining life, and this is very easy, and this is right, and only for this purpose a human is here, while everything else, pardon me, already comes from the animal. However, even that which is from the animal should have a human face. If a person is spiritual, he should behave properly both at home and with his friends and everywhere. He should remain a human. Yet this doesn't mean, my friends, that if someone slaps you on the left cheek, you should let him slap your right one too. There used to be a time like that as well. But I'll give you a simple example. I already gave it. If a mad dog bites your right leg, don't give it your left one. This is also right. No matter how much you feed the devil in yourself or in someone else, he won't become more spiritual. That's why everything should be within reasonable limits and evil must be stopped. But good should be supported as well, and at the same time, we all should ensure that there is as little evil as possible, so that the power of Satan is minimal. And it's even better when he is controlled, totally controlled, in all people, in entire humanity, then the world can easily change and the world can become real, just as it should be. It can become wonderful, in which you want to live. Even here, even in this world. Many will certainly say, how come even here? We actually want to live here. My friends, you want to live here only because you don't know anything else.
Igor Mikhailovich, I've recalled an ancient Oriental wisdom that the one who hasn't found the source within oneself is constantly attached to the well and will never start the path.
Of course.
Yes, and once you also mentioned that it's also important to become a source as well.
Absolutely. And it's also important to distinguish between perception through feelings and perception imposed from the outside. I'll give a simple example. A person who has been in pridefulness throughout his life and so on. He hasn't comprehended the knowledge, and so while walking across the desert, There is no water, he wants to drink, he is parched with thirst, his energy is running out, and he sees a guide sign on which it is written to the left 100 kilometers water, to the right 3 meters H2O. Well, of course he will walk 100 kilometers but will still hope for there is actually water, right?
Right.
Well, another person who has been working spiritually, meaning who has been developing, he will say, I got it, it's clear, water 100 kilometers away and water 3 meters away. Of course, it's not difficult for me to take 2 steps.
Right.
That's the difference, my friends. In this case, by the knowledge, I mean spiritual knowledge. And the source is always near. You can go and search for it in the mountains, in the forests, wherever you like, but if you are lucky and if you understand where this source is, whether you are in the mountains or in the forest or in the caves, you will still understand the same thing, that it has always been with you. It is inside you. It's the closest possible thing to a human.
A person just shouldn't comfort himself with imaginary illusions that he's doing something without doing this, because, as you already said,
Surely.
many people just pretend that they follow the spiritual path.
Yes.
And also, what really hinders, what really leads astray?
Or they value something earthly, whatever it is, more than the spiritual. Unfortunately, this is so.
And they don't admit it to themselves.
Well, it's because consciousness says that this is right, or they love themselves so much that this prevents them from gaining life. And this is also true. Selfishness that prevents a person from mastering the path of salvation, is it really selfishness? It is suicide, my friends.
Also, participants of the Allatra movement have sent to us, have shared a good example that they have chosen such a tool for themselves that at the end of the day they sit down and note, ask themselves the question, have I sincerely and truly done everything possible in order to be closer to God today, here and now? Can I go to sleep tonight, go to God with a clear conscience that I've done my utmost? And this helps them to live, so to say, to the fullest and not to wend their way through life at half capacity. Such examples of people certainly make you happy, and people also respond and say that honesty towards themselves helps them a lot.
The most important thing
Yes.
is simple honesty. To stop lying to yourselves and to stop listening to the actors who distract you. That is, having studied, having observed your consciousness at least a little bit, you will understand that thoughts come to you. They're not yours, and sometimes it's extremely difficult to repulse them. But it's much easier to switch attention to what you need. To stop listening, no matter what kind of thought has come, no matter what it tells you, the world is collapsing, you will die now. Fine, you will die now, but it's better if your body dies together with these demons while you remain living now. If you take the right decision, if, let's say, your greatest values, attention and time, you invest in the right, so to say, bank where you'll get dividends, and not in the one where your values will be stolen. Well, I've put it in such a simple language, excuse me.
Also, regarding honesty, we often encounter such examples among people in daily life that they say, I'm an honest person, and by honesty, a person understands some straightforwardness and openness, but sometimes in a tactless manner, so to say.
But many people boast that they are honest, that they are so straightforward. They say everything bluntly to everyone and have nothing to hide. Well, that's pridefulness and stupidity. But if we look at how that person changes his mask in front of his boss, or let's say in front of another person who is much stronger physically than him, and what do we see? That this most honest lion turns into a small chihuahua and starts licking the feet of the one who is stronger and higher. Isn't that so?
How can a person distinguish what this really is? This very
Honesty, not to lie to himself, but to assess as it is, not to listen to the assessment from Consciousness, first of all, because what does consciousness do? It either exalts a person, or belittles him after exalting him, or exalts him after belittling. I mean, doesn't this remind you of anything?
According to experience, you always expect that as soon as consciousness starts to exalt you,
It means that tomorrow, or even in 5 minutes, it will belittle
you
you.
know, it as if raises a throne from which it really wants to throw you
It
off.
always does that.
And you just watch it building a pedestal which it throws you off and raises you up again, throws off and raises up again, and scenes
And
such.
that will continue until a person decides
Yes.
to stop engaging in this masochism. Unless, of course, he likes these falls and rises, but this is all an illusion. And where is this person actually? He's lying by the road,
Yes.
calmly. That's if you look at it a little bit from another dimension.
Yes.
While in three-dimensionality, it seems to him that it is so.
Yes, we also received a question relevant to the subject of diaries, regarding keeping a diary, that I take notes every day. Consciousness torments me. I keep writing down, but it goes on and on. I write all the time, but it goes on. I mean, it keeps repeating.
Wait a moment. I write and do nothing. What do you write for? Here's a simple question. What is the purpose of writing? To see regular and stereotypical patterns, to understand that it's not yours, it's imposed on you. You have seen it, but if you don't oppose it, and if you don't eliminate it, if you don't live by the spiritual and don't aspire to self-development, it will always continue no matter how much you write, even if during all your life, until your last breath, as long as you can write, it will be throwing in the same to you. Isn't that so? Why would the system invent anything if this works? Simply.
Yes.
Diaries are needed to understand that the devil exists, right?
Diaries are needed at a certain stage of development while personality is developing. They are necessary to identify patterns, things that you can miss and not see. They are especially good for someone who hesitates, who doesn't understand, who has doubts that he is the one whom a couple of actors play badminton in your head, while you are sort of a shuttlecock. In order to stop being a shuttlecock, which is driven back and forth, it's good to use this tool for this very purpose. You have written down, you have seen a pattern, you have realized, you have eliminated it, you have ceased to feed these themes that your consciousness palms off on you. It's very simple and easy. It's a wonderful tool that you need to know how to use. Or rather, not just to know how to use, but you need to use it. No special skills are needed. All this is very simple. If thoughts and doubts are thrown into you, if you get exalted and dropped the way we've just talked about, is this normal? A person shouldn't have any hesitations. In reality, one can live simply. So, you have seen and realized that there is the devil. You have felt that there is God. You have eliminated everything superfluous and you just go to God. Don't let bad thoughts in. Don't be bad. Live honestly towards yourself. Assess. And what is honesty? When a person commits an act economically beneficial to him or to his megalomania, but immediately begins to justify himself, yet he commits this act to the dictation of Satan and justifies himself in his own eyes as spiritual personality. Well, I'm actually spiritual, I did it in order to take some position, and later I will be able to do more for the spiritual world. In other words, such market relations with the spiritual world begin. Isn't that so? But when you are honest with yourself, you know very well that these are all lies, lies coming from those very demons that manipulate you, which have exalted your pridefulness to the utmost, and you are told to do this or that way. This is wrong, this is not good, this is against your conscience, this is not needed. Or it immobilizes you when on the contrary you have to act, while you're trying to justify yourself. This is what honesty is needed for, to really assess everything as it is and to act the way you should act, not the way these demons want. That's when everything will be right. Then a stone, lying on the side of the road, turns into a bird, which doesn't even need to walk. It can fly much faster while others walk. And that also happens.
Regarding honesty, it's very encouraging when frank letters come from people, especially from people who also belong to different religions. In particular, there is a question from a priest. How can he immediately extinguish his offense? But what did he say? That as soon as I come to the church for the liturgy and start preparing for the service, immediately, like a black fog, memories of numerous little momentary resentments, troubles, and annoyances come flying. For example, I recall how long this or that hierarchical award was delayed, or how I was bypassed by some Jubilee cross and other nonsense.
Again, this is all human. How can it be otherwise? Well, if we face the truth, when a person is performing a prayer practice or a spiritual practice, when he's doing it to the dictation of Satan, there is a mess in his head. Eventually he forgets the words, he gets confused. Why? Because he thinks more about a donkey instead of thinking about God. Where he invests his attention, that's what happens. The person asks how to get rid of this, but at the same time his pridefulness and his selfishness push him to what? To have some other shoulder boards, a wider cross, something else, a softer chair. Well, it's an organization, that's understandable. And there is a hierarchy, and he's trying to take some post, something else, because it's more profitable and more comfortable. Just like in business, a person who is in business wants to make more money. It's logical, it's normal, it's a natural desire of an inevitably dead creature. I emphasize. It shouldn't be a desire if a person is on the spiritual path. But this doesn't prevent him from earning more money or getting a big rank. Nothing hinders, even the spiritual path. But another thing is whether you are attached to this or not. If you are not attached to this and you are free from all this won't hinder you. And then the tamed demons must exactly serve to provide you with what is necessary. Again, necessary for what? To elevate your selfishness or your pridefulness, or to use opportunities to help people. But it's a person himself who decides this by means of dishonesty and his spiritual development, right? Or as it often happens that a person says, now I will become even richer, I will earn a little more, and then I will start helping people. This will never happen.
Yes.
Why? Because greed is above everything else.
The devil is always hungry. It will never be enough for him.
Of course, he's always hungry. Let's have a look, as people say, at the modern oligarchy. Why do people having enormous capitals that are enough for their great-great-great-grandchildren still want to make money by taking away from the poor and by robbing them? After all, this is not fair and not right, but they are. There is no other way. If you want to become too rich, you have to go over corpses. This is an axiom. Yet why do people do that? Because a beast can never get satiated. And having become a beast, a human will always be hungry. By the beast, I don't mean some pig, it's exactly the simplest beast, and if it's fed, you won't be able to shove anything extra in it. Well, in this context, by the beast I mean exactly Satan or consciousness, no matter what we call him. But the fact remains. Having merged with Satan, a human becomes just like him. And then, feeling personality suffering, he understands that he is acting wrong, and immediately this little beast in his head comforts him. Well, you will grow a little bit more, and that's when you will surely be able to live, to embark on the spiritual path. At best, he sends him to some confessor somewhere, or to some renowned hermit who will tell him how to read a prayer correctly or to put some bandage on his arm, and everything will pass and everything will be forgiven.
You've mentioned a donkey, and I've recalled this parable. There is an Oriental parable about a donkey. There lived a madman who didn't want to participate in joint prayers. And one Friday, with great difficulty, people managed to persuade him to be present at the gathering. But when the man who conducted the prayer started singing, the madman started screaming like a donkey. The other people concluded that he had simply yielded to the bout of madness, and at the same time wishing to help him, they addressed him. Don't you have any idea of God at all? If you can produce such animal noise while being at the gathering of believers? But the madman answered, I was just doing the same thing as the one who conducts the prayer. When he started singing, he was buying a donkey. And so I bawled like a donkey. Yet, when this strange remark was conveyed to the one who conducted the prayer, he confessed, when I was uttering, God is higher than everything, I was actually thinking about my household. And when I got to the phrase, glory to God, I thought that I should buy a donkey. Right at that moment, I heard his screaming. As a matter of fact, when he was praising God,
He was thinking about buying a donkey.
yes,
Yet who doesn't do this? And who doesn't sin this way? And the very point is exactly in the fact that a person performs, as they say, a sacrament, while sacrament is communication with the spiritual world. Well, or with the devil, whoever prefers what. But the point is that when a person performs a prayer practice or a spiritual practice, he shouldn't trade donkeys, and everything will be fine.
Igor Mikhailovich, you said that people also turn to spiritual experience in their religions. And I'd like to also bring an example, let's say from mystical experience, from Hesychasm. The example is as follows. If one doesn't want to be distracted by anything during a prayer, it is suggested to people to do the following. In the depths of a monastic cell, meaning in the semi-darkness, to get into a special position, tilting the beard down to the chest, to look where the heart is, and having calm to the breath, to detach oneself from impressions in such a way so as not to perceive time anymore. In that state, one should stay for quite a long time until the sad mood gives way to inexpressible joy and shining light appears before one's eyes, which was called the divine and uncreated light in Hesychasm. And indeed, a lot of people basically tried to follow this instruction, and in this way to perform their, let's say, prayers and practices. But except sleeping, kind of nothing special happened. What is missing in this experience?
It means they actually didn't try hard enough. These practices which are described, it means this is such a physical position of the body when a person tilts his head. He should press his head tightly. For arteries supply our brain, 2 posterior vertebral ones and 2 carotid arteries. And when a person does this, his cervical lordosis gets straighter. Vertebral arteries become overstretched and a bit squeezed. And at the same time, by tilting, he slightly squeezes his carotid arteries. And natural hypoxia occurs. And here he shouldn't only make his breath quiet, but he should hold his breath, meaning his breath has to be gentle to such an extent that it's unnoticeable. This is the right interpretation. So in this case, hypoxia occurs, and the person involuntarily falls into a certain state of auto-hypnosis, meaning he begins to see hallucinations. And if at that time the person is praying and doing it diligently, then naturally such things arise in his head. Simply a paradise. And having come out of this state, yet why, when a person falls into such a state, it doesn't last long. The body takes such a position when it's uncontrolled that improves blood circulation. And having been there literally a bit of time, the brain explodes, but at the same time a lot of hallucinations come to the person, and he wakes up in a cheerful, elevated mood, because endorphin, which is, let's say, a hormone of happiness, is produced, while the body, brain, at this time perceives all this as a trauma, hypoxia, and in order to block these states naturally, it secretes these opiates, meaning the person has both an emotional outburst plus what he saw. And if he was also praying before going into that state, then naturally thematic associations plus consciousness would help him, as we have already said, and he comes out of it as if he has visited heaven. So it is trivial self-deception, and it has nothing to do with the spiritual, and there are plenty of similar practices. It's the same as to sit in the raven position, meaning to sit down low, to squat down, touch your knees with your chin and press it tightly, meaning the effect is the same, but vice versa. Here, already overstretching of carotid arteries takes place, vertebrals, meaning of vertebral arteries, there is holding one's breath too, and the effect is the same, and diligent praying. While one shall pronounce a prayer within, holding one's breath, and the same effect occurs. There are others who advised and described as well. We put the left hand on the solar plexus and press a bit with the right one. We should lie down in the self, pull our legs to ourselves, and this strong pressure should go along with holding our breath. Thus we push the heart to the mind, and we approach the heart with the mind. God, that's how children fooled around, pressed each other like this while holding the breath, and the effect was the same. But why? Do such respected people, monks who are addressed and exalted by everyone, nearly angels on earth, why do they engage in this? A simple question. They do it after all. It's all because they have lost their sailing guide. They have gone so far, unfortunately, in their ramblings, in search of the road, that they have stopped at tried magic, they have stopped at banal auto-hypnosis, at lies and self-deception, but inside they do strive, whereas the knowledge is lost. And this is exactly the result of interference of those demons whom they were called to fight against. But the banal human factor, unfortunately this is so. That's the experience they get, and afterwards they say that they sort of talk to the Virgin Mary and Jesus Christ himself came to them, and that they are already equal among equals. And you cannot make this person change his mind because he actually saw it. Well, in fact, they don't have any experience of working with consciousness, with those very demons, and getting in such a simple way that hallucination, it's actually not just an altered state of consciousness, it was an altered reality for him. The person will already hold on to this and think that he's already a saint as he has been in heaven. And he will tell others about that, and it's very tempting for the mind. Why? Because other demons in other people's heads pick it up readily because they recognize the tricks of, again, their master. Everything is very simple. And those who take mushrooms, let's put it this way, or substances like LSD on the spiritual path, is this normal? After all, it's the same. The effect is the same. Self-deception, lies. They get illusion instead of life. This is actually extremely sad. This indicates that they people forgot about their prophets and already engage in what is far from the genuine, although they strive sincerely. But what is easier? To get rid of, or let's put it this way, to take control of the demon in the head, pardon me, or to provoke hypoxia in oneself and enter that auto-hypnosis with hallucinations. What is easier? Under the control and dictation of consciousness.
A quick result, a search for a quick result.
Sure.
We also ran across information about breathing in lots of religions. In Hesychasm, in Sufism, and in Hinduism, it is said about breath control.
People asked me about breathing, and quite often. After all, breathing is used everywhere. Whatever we take, any religion, it is important everywhere. Especially in the most closed, secret one, in such nooks for the initiated, for those who really achieved something, only to those ones the great secret of the right breathing is revealed. In fact, all this leading to hypoxia or hyperventilation and causing the same effects. All this sacrament of theirs leads exactly to hallucination. But why is actually so much attention paid to this? Because it's a mystery. Because it's all serious. And look how consciousness immediately, right? Because consciousness, my friends, immediately says, this is serious information, this is breathing, this is action after all. And at this point, people are ready to breathe, not to breathe, to do something, and think that they are developing spiritually, that this will lead them to some kind of power, to some kind of magic, that they will get something. I'm often asked, what is the right way to breathe? I respond, well, how to breathe? Not to forget to breathe, that's the right way, and not to control breathing. Breathing should be natural. As soon as a person begins to control his breathing, it's the same as controlling his steps. Just try. A simple thing. Those of you who want can experiment a little. When you are walking, think over your every move. How your body is in space, how you step heel to toe or vice versa, whichever you prefer. I'll see how long you will walk like that. With breathing, it's the same. Breath control. is a good thing for athletes. If they do sports and train breathing correctly, this is necessary and important. Whereas in spiritual practices, you are where your attention is. If your attention is in matter, in stupidity, then you will be a material fool. I'm sorry, my friend, but you shouldn't fool around. And I'll put it simply, don't play cards with a swindler. And don't entrust your spiritual development to Satan. This is one and the same thing, an inevitable loss.
You've just touched upon the topic of breathing and counting steps. Indeed, there are Naqshbandi rules in the East, which actually mention that you need to count your inhales and exhales. You must follow your steps and not forget to remember God at every step. That remembering God, you must exactly count how many times during the day you have mentioned Him, that is, pronounced.
They also introduced that a person must pronounce God's name 5,000 times
Yes, exactly.
during the day. And that's what spirituality is. Guys, but I have a simple question. Firstly, the name is still his epithets, right? So will we throw epithets around? Or will we move towards God? What is more important? A simple question. To lie like a stone by the road, screaming, or to walk? What is more important? To gain life, or to gain a hallucination? After all, the path means movement. Isn't that so?
It is.
It is precisely walking that makes the road, yes.
It cannot be otherwise. No matter how much you shout, so what? Should God hear you? Take pity and come? Or He must get so annoyed, kind of, hey, stop yelling and come out to quarrel with you at least. And that's when you beheld God, right? Sorry, but God isn't a neighbor. No matter how much we yell in the material world, this is not heard in the spiritual world.
Igor Mikhailovich, I also wanted to quote such a point from the experience of ascetics. They talk about thoughts. There is a demon called a wanderer, vagrant, who appears before the brethren mostly at dawn. He leads their minds from city to city, from village to village, and from house to house. First, simple meetings are arranged, then conversations with acquaintances take place, and finally, long conversations are conducted. As a result of such imaginary meetings, one's own peaceful state of an ascetic soul is ruined. And then they describe that right after this very, let's say, wanderer, vagrant demon, the rest of the demons come. Immediately fell into the hands of either the demon of fornication, or the demon of anger, or the demon of melancholy, that is, those demons that most of all darken the brightness of a hermit's state of the soul. And here arises the question, what kind of demon is that, let's say the vagrant that comes at dawn?
And what do we encounter again? We encounter religious interpretations. And to those who, let's say, don't want to go to God, but want to seem too clever, nothing else comes to their mind but to complicate what is simple. And they begin to invent all kinds of demons. The vagrant demon, what else was there?
The demon of fornication, the demon of anger, of melancholy.
The demon of fornication, the demon of anger, and so on, meaning giving names to the actors in the head. Well, guys, but these are merely programs. These are elementary things. We distinguish them because we hear the disputes of different people and the like. We call them demons because they are called so. We got used to the word demons, and so on. Why does this happen? A simple question. The moment of awakening, when the initial contact, let's say, of primary consciousness with personality takes place, but the activity of primary consciousness isn't clearly pronounced yet. It's an open gate for secondary consciousness. And it attacks, with its hallucinations, immediately stirs up memory and everything else, but as a rule with something which will provoke personality, and which it will finance without question. And a moment arises here, as soon as a person has entered this, a conversation with someone, or let's say a trip to the past, it doesn't matter. Then all sorts of things will come next, the demon of fornication and whatever they call it, and of alcoholism, and of everything else. Why? Because this is the elementary work of secondary consciousness. In other words, as soon as personality let's say, has funded what is unnecessary in a larger volume than needed, it becomes addicted and it's already very difficult for it to break out of the circle of these events occurring in the mind. In fact, nothing is happening there. It's just an information exchange. And when you know and understand this, but you feel something different, you live by what you feel, and you don't really care what they are telling you. In the morning is the same. A person doesn't have an experience of complete control, but he strives. He knows and understands what consciousness is and how it works. He wakes up in the morning and memories of the past begin to attack him. Does he need them? A simple question. He understands that no, he doesn't. What will he do? He immediately, instantly plunges into spiritual practice. He simply plunges into contact with the spiritual world. What will happen to those demons if God's light ignites in a person? All these shadows will instantly disappear because these are merely shadows in consciousness. Will other demons come to him then? If some shadows have disappeared, can any other ones really come? Darkness doesn't go to light. Is this difficult?
Great. No, it's not.
Absolutely not. Why does this monk not have simple elementary knowledge? But no, they will instruct him, in this case, you must do something, read something a certain number of times or something else. And buying a donkey, he will be reading a mass of prayers, while thinking about what? About fornication. Isn't that so?
Exactly.
And he will fight with this his entire life, remaining a hermit at that. Is he actually alone? A hermit means alone. Yet what about, where will he get away from these demons in his head? Do you remember, once we also discussed whether it's good or bad to be a hermit, to leave and isolate oneself from people? We precisely said then that they isolate themselves from people only so that people visit them more, because they seem holier, and so on, by and large. It's just business. Whereas those hermits who really retreated from people, they did that only because they were disgusted. When they gained a little bit of life, and they understood the essence of things, they were disgusted to listen to all this stupidity. In such a way, they simply broke away from the system of, let's say, certain values in order to live with God. But they broke away and retreated where people couldn't find them. And they lived among beasts, because it is much calmer among beasts than among people who are preoccupied with beastly things. Why? Because when a human lives like a beast, he is much more dangerous. A beast with huge intelligence is fearsome.
Yes. There is also a question regarding, is it better to work on one's own or to practice with a group?
Depending on what you do.
Spiritual practices, meditations.
Spiritual practices, but it's not to work, it's to gain life. Is this really work? Work, работа in Russian, originates from the word slave, rab. You execute something to the dictation of somebody, right? But can a spiritual practice actually be work? Again, why have I focused on your wording? We are accustomed to these expressions, and we use them. Spiritual work on oneself and the like. Thus we manipulate these words, forgetting their meaning. Well, through this word, something else can easily enter, right?
Right.
Since we agree that we are slaves of the system itself, hence, pardon me, go dancing to its dictation. Whereas in fact, all kidding and carping aside, collective work is certainly better. But only when a group is in resonance. All this takes place much faster when everyone really strives, when everyone is honest with themselves and with each other, just like the first Christians. Again, let's take those very Gnostics. After all, what did they have? They had exactly purification from all this filth, meaning they had exposure of that very Satan. They could actually talk freely about what was coming to their consciousness. What for? In order to expose all actions, in order for people to understand that when a thought comes to them, they already recall something else. No, I don't need this. You won't deceive me, Satan, because I strive for God and I love God. I don't need your nibbled apple, he says, right? So, well, isn't it so?
It is. And it was also in such a situation when there was so much persecution, they
Sure.
exactly understood that there is no tomorrow, that there is only now and this love.
Of course. And again, collective support, collective love, collective striving, all this accelerates and enhances it. While it's harder for a person to cope with lots of these demons alone, as they say, because there are so many of them that if we begin to enumerate everything, in fact, it's hard to resist alone. One can easily lose one's way, go astray, fall into illusion or something else.
Yes, I've just recalled the experience of the first Sufi groups in the East. People gathered and followed one goal. They gathered in order to know God. They gathered together, discussed the interpretations of Quran, and shared their spiritual experience collectively. And this lasted until they became world-famous saints. And word spread.
And it spoiled them.
Yes, and word spread around the world that there were such saints one could get close to. After all, a Sufi is a person who can. Any person can become a Sufi if he follows the rules. And later on, when people were coming to them, they forgot that they should come for God.
And with time, people forgot where they were going to.
Right. And with time, they simply forgot that the path,
They went after glory.
after glory and holiness of those people,
Sure, it was again that very simony.
to receive, yes.
As simple as that. Everyone chooses their own. Someone goes, let's say, to those very religions, to search for God while someone seeks better living. Well, it's people's choice. Someone chooses life and receives it, while someone chooses death and also gets it. Freedom of choice is fundamental.
By the way, an interesting phrase was found in the experience of ascetics. It is both joy and anguish for me to speak about this love, the bliss of which I have lost. It was more than once in my life by God that as soon as I realized with my mind, my left side, what was happening to me by God's mercy, the light left me. And very often, while describing the life of Hesychasm precisely at Athos, it is said that a monk is entirely in God. He is in the light and the light is in him. However, he has no reaction of the mind to this occasion. He sees it as a natural state. And here, I'd also like to raise this question, how at the moment of plunging in spiritual practices, this left side comes, meaning it's the one who...
Again, those ones speak about it, who have this experience, and they exactly refer to,
left side.
again, the left essence, meaning what is on the left, or why do they say, the devil whispers from the left side and the like. After all, if we read even the experience of true, I emphasize, true elders of Athos, those who were striving for God indeed, because there are also a lot of imitators, who easily and well quoted many people pretend to be eternally ill, provoking pity in everybody. Such, tricky behavior, there is no other way to put it. Yet, there were, and there are, those who really live by God, and those who master the spiritual path. Then again, they cognize the structure of a human too. They are perfectly aware of the fact that anger and fear come from the right side. From the left side always come flattery, slyness, slippery, and all the rest, while memories come from behind, while in the front we strive for God. If we are attacked almost from all sides, but we go forward towards the light, then, naturally, all the rest goes silent. Trivial things, those which are described in Allat, are now forgotten by them, although they had this knowledge once. They were well aware of it at that very Athos, and nowadays, thank God, for some the true knowledge comes back in its purity and simplicity. Yet many learned it, even through those crumbs which were left, these 2 grains, they developed them to such an extent that they learned all 27. And that's true.
I don't know how relevant it is to ask this question now, but we receive emails in which people actually are trying to find these two grains in religions, everyone in their own, as well as the rest of the grains, and they ask, what are these two grains, in fact, which are present in all religions, and what are the rest of the grains?
But that's the point. When they look for them in their religions, they won't find them. Those who want to find need to take all religions, throw away all the unnecessary, and only two grains will be left. While I said that there are 27 of them in Allatra, and certainly many will be interested what is so different about Allatra. And in order to understand it, one needs to do the same work. So when your consciousness has nothing to do and it starts to exploit you, make it work. If this topic is interesting to you, let it study and search. That will be right. You see, that which is given, well, nevertheless, I attribute it to knowledge. It's just knowledge and understanding. Why? There are two grains in any religion, I mean true religions. This is great. This attracts people. This is what gives a chance to people, because if you leave one grain, they would gladly leave one grain. It would be simpler to control people, but the thing is that people would stop going to religions. That's why they have to leave the minimum. Well, the minimum is two, but two grains give a chance for salvation to those who really follow the path. And thanks to the fact that two grains are left, those very Athos monks have such an opportunity as spiritual salvation. Well, in a bit roundabout ways, not along the white road, but nevertheless they do go and reach the goal. So the one who wants will find and learn on their own. Well, if we simply give it, it will be devalued. Who will value something that is simply given, right? But when you worked hard and found it yourself, then you would value it. They say other people's path, if it was surmounted by someone, can be respected, but it's not yours.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is a question from a participant. She writes that consciousness tells me that I have fallen, and it used to be better in practices before. Everything worked out before, while now it's like all falling apart. What should I do with this? How to get out of this state?
Actually, it's very easy. And consciousness, often, let's put it so, deceives people. Telling a person that you have strayed, you have fallen, you will not succeed in anything, and so on. Well, what is necessary? The first thing is to stop listening to your consciousness. It's the worst advisor. And if a person stepped back a little, he just needs to return. Instead of listening to such bad thoughts, one merely needs to come back to what? To contemplation of the spiritual world, meaning to direct his attention not to the dialogue of these actors, but to the contact with the spiritual world, and immediately everything will be fine. A person will get up instantly, even if he fell. My friends, only the one who doesn't fall doesn't rise. Everybody falls on this path. So this is normal. It's a rare exception when a stone turns into a bird. Don't take an example from such people. You need to take an example from yourself. If you got up once, don't fall down anymore. Don't do stupid things, and everything will be all right. Even if you stumbled, come back, but don't play with that and don't listen to consciousness which says, you fell once and rose, so next time you fall, you will also rise. Nothing terrible will be in that. It will be. If once you rose, you might not rise the second time and remain a puppet in the system's hands. That's why. If you feel the spiritual world, don't break this connection. Hold on to it as the most precious, the most important thing, and then everything will be fine.
Igor Mikhailovich, you've just described the example of those people who fell and immediately rose. But there are different examples of people who didn't simply, let's say, stray from the path, but strayed from this direct path to a great extent. And they understand that consciousness attacks them so much, and they feel that there is the spiritual world, and they know that there is God, and something alive stirs inside, but consciousness's attacks are so strong and have led them astray from God so far that consciousness even stands against against God to some degree. What should people do in such a situation? They have the knowledge, they apparently have the information on how to save themselves, but still, how to get out of this? Because except for despair and some kind of an extreme point of despair,
The simplest thing is to stop being an egoist. Just to stop being an egoist. Because egoism is destructive, it leads to death. And where do these people fall into in the first place? Into egoism, even into opposition to God. Why does this happen? Because, I'll repeat it, my friends, but I think it's necessary. Because a person as a subpersonality is much more profitable for consciousness than as an angel. Because thus consciousness extends its existence for centuries or even millennia. And it will do anything to not just make a person fall, but to draw him into these states when he already goes against himself, yet justifies himself by common sense, although he feels something different inside. He should stop being afraid that people will judge him if he comes back. What difference does it make to you, my friend, whether they will judge you or not? Only demons in other people's heads will judge. While a demon in someone else's head is like a neighbor's dog, it's barking, so let it bark. Don't listen and you'll be fine. If you focus on the neighbor's dog barking and preventing you from sleeping, you'll never fall asleep. But if you don't listen to it, then you don't hear it and sleep peacefully. It's the same in this case. Stop being an egoist. Stop being afraid. And you need to do what you feel, not what Satan commands you to do. It's not difficult. You need to get on the road, into the ranks of those who are walking, and to surmount this path shoulder to shoulder with them. Yes, you must step over pridefulness, step over the devil. But isn't it the most important thing, to step over the devil? What can be more important than life, my friends? And should you worry about pridefulness here? You can remain a proudling and gain death. Many people also do that, but then they repent for centuries. Will that really make it any easier? Consciousness confidently interprets only the present time, but afterwards, when a person becomes a subpersonality, that very consciousness already directly reproaches personality and says, you listened and you chose, you did that. Is this the right thing to do? A simple question. After all, it merely offers. But it's the person who pays. He pays for his death. Is that the right thing to do? Instead of choosing life, instead of walking along a smooth road, a person goes into such wilds from which he no longer finds a way back. But it's a lie that there is no road. There is always a road. And it's extremely simple, and it's always near people. God never leaves a human. It's the human who leaves God, and you need to know that. That's why, my friends, let's live so as to never turn off our road, the straight road, where we can come home, come to God honestly, with our heads held high, and without listening to consciousness. What can be better than God's love? Isn't that so? But it all starts with simple first steps, with love for each other. Therefore, let's love each other. Thank you. Thank you for being with us.